we want the team to grow to around 550 transactions over the next 12 months. We did 391 transactions at 151 million of business in 2025, just by comparison. And we're already trending up a bit. Of course, that January and February I was telling you about, kind of, we're kind of trending with 2025, but now with where we're going, now that the accountability and everything is really starting to show the benefits, and we're starting to see the actions from that, I think we're going to trend in that direction.
Hello, everyone. Sergio Tiffer here, and welcome back to Cracking the Code. Today's episode is a special one because we're welcoming back a longtime friend of the show. It's been nearly 2 years since Kris Weaver has joined us, and during that time, we've seen major shifts across the real estate industry. Markets have changed, technology has evolved, and team leaders have had to adapt faster than ever before. Kris Weaver is the principal broker of Atlantic Sotheby's International Realty, an entrepreneur, team leader, and someone who has built a reputation for creating high-performing businesses through leadership, accountability, and strategic growth. Today, we're diving into some of the topics that matter most for team leaders right now: accountability, culture, ISA departments, ancillary businesses, and how to build a real estate organization that thrives in any market. Kris, welcome back to the show. It's great to have you here. How are you doing, Kris? It's good to have you back.
I'm doing great. How are you doing, Sergio?
Doing great. Although we see each other all the time, it's been about 2 years since the last time I have you on the podcast. Time flies, right?
It's crazy how time flies. I was about to say long time no see. I can't believe it's been 2 years since we've done this.
Yeah, it's crazy. Well, it's been a minute since I first had the idea of having this podcast, but we have so many people now that it seems like it wasn't a long time ago, but at the same time, it felt like it was a long time ago, if you know what I mean.
And your studio there looks amazing as well.
Yeah. So it's been 2 years. Looking back in time, what do you think has been your biggest lesson in the last 2 years? The market has been crazy, ups and downs all the time. So give me your perspective.
So I'll go back to the 2 year period preceding the last 2 year period, and we all know what that was like. The market was on fire, everything sold, everything just seemed so much easier. And I think the last 2 years has just taught us that we really need to tighten up. We need to use every opportunity to grow. We need to manage our people properly. We need to cut the fat. We need to delegate. We need to, of course, use virtual assistants to save money. But we need to use every opportunity we can to avail us, for our business. I was actually just talking to an associate earlier today, and he was talking about, and he's in the insurance side of the business, and he was talking about a email that he can send over to the lender every time they get a referral opportunity. And I said, that's great that you're looking at that, but you should look at every item of contact, every moment of contact that you have a moment of contact with the customer, with an agent, with a lender. What can you do? Because there's always lots of opportunities there. So I think that type of mindset is really what you've had to carry into the last 2 years to, in some cases, for some people, survive, and in a lot of cases, for even more people, grow. So that's kind of what the last 2 years taught me. You really got to lean in, got to work harder, but you can still thrive. I mean, we work together all the time, and I think we've seen growth, and we've been happy, with all the stuff that we do. You can still have a really, really good time. You just can't keep doing the same thing you were doing before. Sometimes it's easy, and sometimes it requires, a little bit more effort.
Yeah, that's true. I mean, you know the saying, how it goes is the market shouldn't dictate what you do. Your strategy should dictate what you do, and that strategy should carry over all the time. But we get easy, we get complacent. Oh, it's going good. Things are selling for over asking, blah blah blah, and we just don't do what we need to do, I guess, right? And that translates into accountability. And I know that's very important for you because I've talked to you about team accountability and whatnot throughout the years. Because I know you're an advocate of culture. You're probably one of the biggest person I know that it's very lean. They're very keen into office culture, having people in office at least a few times a week. So how that has translated, because agents, like you said, in the 2 years preceding to that 2 year period that I just asked you about, agents were selling tons of houses, things were flying off the shelves. And now they have to, mutate into this more, I wouldn't say weaker market. I would say just more normal market, because maybe
Yeah.
we were not used to, for the 3 years, the COVID period and whatnot. We just thought, this is the way market, this is the way the market should be, but it's really not. What we're seeing
Right.
right now, it's more of a regular market, right? So accountability, culture. Can you expand on that a little bit? How you see things in that front, having people in office, having activities together, going to trips together with your agents, and just in
Yeah.
general, not having a larger team, but more of a smaller, more robust, and higher producer team, right? If that makes sense.
Yeah, I can definitely talk about that. So, right after COVID and during COVID, we saw a couple things. Okay. So first thing is of course during COVID, we all went touchless. We all went, into doing Zooms. And I think a lot of teams, including us, we started doing our meetings remotely. Well, of course, when you do that, you're going to lose the office culture, you're going to lose the office energy, and even more importantly, you're going to lose accountability. But just like what you were talking about, Sergio, I mean, during that period of time, it didn't matter, because all the chips fell into the right spot. Houses were moving, agents were happy, everything was great. Of course, that period of time was artificial, right? So as we started moving into more of a normal market the last 2 years, right? What we saw is trying to do the business the old way didn't work. So we went from, of course, no days in the office to 1 day in the office to 2 days, 3 days. And then we just keep on adding that and adding. So now we've settled in on 3 days in the office. Of course, all the calls have to be made in the office. But we recently just made that change. And, all the way up until I would say the third and fourth quarter of last year, we were playing the game like some try to play it, where they're only doing one meeting a month. Everything that they do is by Zoom. And then there's just not that much interaction. And then we even tried doing the points system to kind of let the agents really show, basically if they were producing, they would get more. And if they weren't producing, they would get less. And what we saw production fall, even from the top producers who produce a lot, their production fell. The middle producers, their production went to a low amount, and the low producers, they didn't do anything at all. And that culminated it, for us into some horrible numbers in January. I mean, we had, I think, 18, 19 closings, maybe even 17 closings in 1 month in January, and the same in February, which is about half of what we normally produce. Now, there were some things with the market, and I think we both agree that would indicate the market was a little slower during that time. But then when we kind of pulled the cord and yanked the train track back over to full-time in office, full accountability, which of course is always a little painful to try to reinstall that. The numbers came way up, and lo and behold, this month we are currently at, I think on the team side, we're at about 30 transactions. The goal set at the beginning of the month was 34. It's the 18th of the month, so obviously we're going to blow right past that goal. We're probably going to do 50 transactions this month. Now, part of that is seasonal, but I mean, typically, if you look at seasonality, you don't do 3 times as many transactions, at least here in June, as you do in January. You might do 50 to 70% more, but not 300% more transactions. And that's all about accountability. And then it's also about getting culture. The energy in the office is better. People are talking, people are having fun, they're socializing, and people like that. They like having a purpose. They like coming to work. And frankly, they do like the accountability. So it works well.
So do you have more agents now versus what you had at the beginning of the year, or less agents?
We have about the same amount of agents. We've really been focusing on the agents more than recruiting. We just brought 2 new agents on in the last couple of weeks. We have brought several agents on to the independent side of our brokerage. I think at least almost half dozen to 10 agents, since the beginning of the year. So it's pretty good growth there. Only a couple agents onto the team side, but a lot of that is due to the fact of, now that we have full accountability, right? And we're looking for the right people, the right personality, and the right culture. There's only so many people that fit our team avatar, who have the right personality profile, who want to work full time, who are properly motivated. And we think we're really, really going to succeed. So we expect the number on the team to grow, probably say another, 6 to 8 over the next 2 quarters. But at the same time, we also see our transaction volume increasing from our existing agents.
Right. So what do you think are the biggest mistakes that probably leaders are they're making right now when trying to implement these levels of accountability in their teams?
Well, I mean, agents naturally they want to resist accountability. Most people try to resist change to some certain degree, And the problem is you're always going to have that outlier agent who might be maybe they're very very high producer, or in some ways they're really really good for your company, really really good for your team. But and for instance, we have one right now. She's a fantastic agent. She's got great culture, but she's kind of operating on her own. Her husband is out in the field, so she's having to move the kids around for baseball. She's having to be here for this and for that, and with that, she's not really able to meet the team commitments, right? So we have a decision, right, Sergio? We could go ahead and bend the rules, for that one person, which of course, that could signal to the rest of the team as favoritism. But worse, it could show that we just don't uphold our standards, right? So she decided to stay with us with our company in general. So we have a great plan, and she's going to grow. But you've got to hold the line. You've got to hold the line. You have to decide what your system looks like, and you have to really, really lean into it. And that might mean that you don't retain every single person, but the ones that you do retain are the right ones. And it's self-reinforcing for culture as well.
So, what do you think? I mean, in general, what do you think leaders should do then? Some practical things that they can do in order to create that environment, that culture, that energy into the office. And I know that many leaders are afraid of losing those high producing agents because, you know, if you have 30 agents, 25 agents, and you lose two, you'll be fine,
Sure.
right? But if you have 5 agents and you lose two, then that's a different story,
That's
right?
huge. Yeah. Plus, I mean, if you're running leads, I mean, you really need at least about 7 agents to properly hold agents accountable if they're running leads, because otherwise, if you only have 2, 3, 4 agents, it's impossible to turn people on and off. To answer your question though, what do you do? I mean, number one, first and foremost is recognition. I mean, you've got to recognize the effort. You've got to recognize the wins. You've got to get excited about it, because that agent that just did 5 or 6 deals, I mean, they might have been coming off a month or two where they weren't doing so
Right.
well, right? And we all know what it feels like to have months where you're putting in the effort, and you're not seeing the results come through, right? So just because they're high flying and they're doing great, and they're making a lot of money, you need to recognize them. You need to recognize them on your social media. You need to recognize them in meetings. I just can't emphasize how important it is. The other part too is when it comes to team morale and camaraderie and everything else, you got to do the team outings. You have to spend the money too. I mean, some of those team outings, we just did one to the adventure park zip lining, and we actually did a contest last month where we had 3 different teams, right? And the top team was going to go to the adventure park. It's pretty expensive. I think it's like $100 and some dollars per person just for a few hours of zip lining. You know how expensive it can be. And anyway, the whole team just did such a great job that even team number 2 and team number 3 were like, you know what? We went to team number 1 and say, hey, what do you think? Everyone did so good. What do you think about us bringing the entire team? So we did. We brought the entire team out, and you've got to do things like that, to bring people together, to do things outside of work. I mean, it's a team building activity, but it also just, you're putting in your time outside of work, and I mean that's part of what you have to do as well. You can't just monitor systems and monitor your dashboard and do all that sort of thing, and then send a message here or there. You really have to get front and center with your people and show them that you care.
Right. That's very practical. And now, in terms that's on the part of the environment of the culture. Now, in terms of benefits, do you think that teams that are small versus teams that are larger, should they have the same strategy in terms of benefits? Like, for example, I know you run an ISA team, and that's one of the biggest benefits that your team agents do have.
Right.
Can you expand a little bit on that ISA culture and then how you have it? Because I have ISA clients. I've had many ISA clients in the past, and I battle with team leaders because they don't know how to properly implement a benefit of that sort. Right? When the agents don't understand, they don't recognize the benefit of not having to make the appointments, and they don't have to spend 2-3 hours a day just calling,
Right.
calling, and
Yeah.
calling. Right?
Grinding. Yep. Yeah. So what do you need to do there? So number one, if you have any team of size, I would say, I mean, gosh, even if you're a single agent with a couple assistants and you're making calls, you're calling the expireds, and you're working leads, you probably should have one ISA as a backstop. ISAs are really a factor of the scale and size of your team, right? So if you've got, two, three agents, four agents, and you have a certain amount of leads coming in, you're going to need to scale up beyond, one ISA. For me, I think we have about 12 right now. So we have
Right.
quite a few ISAs. And we have 19 agents right now. So you can just look at what that ratio looks like there. We do have
How
a
do you
lot.
start it with the ISAs? How was the first ISA? How was that experience? I mean, for people that is trying to figure that out. I mean, you started ISA teams, what, 7, 8 years ago, probably, if I'm not
Yeah,
mistaken.
so I mean, before we started working with VOOV and before we really had a management structure in place, to be honest with you, it worked okay. Sometimes it was pretty good, sometimes it wasn't. But if you don't have the proper oversight going on with your ISA team, it's unfortunately call numbers are going to drop. So having someone who's watching people, making sure that they're making their calls, using the right script and everything is very important. But just as important as that is a team where the agents are held highly accountable. If you have a team where the agents are just they can kind of do whatever they want, because at the end of the day, maybe they get 60% of their business from Sphere, and maybe that Sphere is $1 million transactions, right?
Right.
Well, how likely are they to work a $400,000 buyer lead that was just queued up from an ISA that is maybe qualified, maybe not, when they know that their next two deals are going to be referrals at $1 million, right? So you got to pick the right team. I would say most teams, and you look at the subset of clients they work with, most teams are set up, at least they're marketing to the people who would be the right people that they would want to have an ISA team. But the other part is if the agents themselves are not highly accountable, then you're going to have difficulty working with an ISA team. I think you would totally agree, right?
Yeah, I would agree so, but a lot of people don't see it that way.
I mean, I wouldn't do it. I mean, if you know you're running your team by the seat of your pants, you're not checking on things, you're not holding them accountable. If you agree that they have to do 20 of whatever it is, and you're fine with 2 or 3 or 4, if you tell your team, you need to call the client within 2 hours, but you let them slide with 1 day, probably
Right.
should probably shouldn't have an ISA team. If, however, you have a well-managed, well-oiled machine where you're holding your people accountable, it's fantastic. I mean, it's absolutely great. It's a huge, 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 huge lever. And I think you started out with the conversation with what's a benefit, right? It's a huge benefit. I mean, like it or not, I mean, the vast majority of agents do not, and calling leads is not even cold calling. They just don't like to make phone calls that much. They don't. And I mean, it's the proof is out there. Even if you just look at Zillow Flex, for instance, right? I mean, we know it for sure. The vast majority of teams, I mean, everyone pays Zillow around a 40% success fee, right? And then the
Right.
vast majority of teams are somewhere between 60% to 40% to the agent. So call it 50-50. So if you take 40 off the top, you got 60. And if you're 50-50 with the agent, you're at 30, right? So what
Right.
does that tell you? Agents will pay 70% of their commission so they don't have to make a phone call. So is an ISA valuable?
Yeah. Yeah. I mean, I absolutely see the value, but a lot of people, I don't think they don't see the value. I think a lot of team leaders do see the value. Where they struggle is implementing it.
Mhm.
Not from a process point of view, more of, all right, let's have a conversation with my agents. This is what we're gonna do. ISs are gonna come in, they're gonna set the appointments, they're gonna help you follow up. Oh, the agents don't want the ISAs to follow up with leads. Okay,
Mhm.
but then your agents are not following up. So who's doing it, right? So that's where I've seen a lot of leaders struggle is the implementation, front facing with their agents saying, hey, this is how we're going to do it. I think communicating the benefit of having an ISA, if I was to be a little bit more direct and clear, is the communication of the benefit of having an ISA with their agents. That's where they fail.
Well, I think the other thing too, Sergio, is I mean the agents that you're with, whether it's the team leader or the people who are under the team leader, I mean they have to be willing to let go of the vine a little bit, right? Because I mean if they don't, they're not going to let the ISAs do what they need to do. Um, if you have an agent that is an absolute control freak, right? And they have to do everything. They have to put the lockbox on the door, do the transaction coordination. They don't want anyone to talk to their client or anything else, right? I mean, should they be on a team at all?
Right. They should be independent.
Yeah, they should be
Absolutely.
independent. They should be independent. So for teams, generally speaking, the agents that you have that work well in a team would also work well with ISAs. And one other thing to bring up too is, AI has gotten better, and AI has got to the point now where I think one of the vendors out there has an AI bot that will actually talk directly to the clients. That's good, because it will move things forward. It will get information from the client in some very easy situations. It will also set the appointment with the client. That's great, right? But if you only have AI and then you have the agents over here, you still have a disconnect. You still need
Right.
to look at that opportunity, look at what was said with the bot, and then someone's got to figure out, okay, well, what is next? I mean, there are going to be some cases where the bot can go ahead and get it all the way to the appointment phase, but in many cases it can't, and that's where it takes someone who's skilled and knows how to do it, knows how to convert and set those appointments.
So what is the percentage that you have right now of conversion in your team in terms of ISA, appointment set driven leads versus sphere in general from the team?
Yeah. So first of all, so we look at qualified appointments, right? And then we also look at METs I mean, the one that we really track is METs to listed, right?
Right.
METs to listed is pretty good. I mean, we're running around 60% MET to listed. So what does that tell you? It tells you that the appointments are pretty good. And it tells you the agents are doing pretty good on those appointments. What was the other part of your question, Sergio?
So I was going to ask you, what is your percentage of listings or buyers agreements that were generated for an ISA effort versus just fear from your agents in general?
So what I will tell you, it's high, and sometimes it's too high. For the month of June, from what I understand, we have about almost 70% of our closings during the month of June coming from ISA set stuff. So it's really, really high.
It's really high.
Now that's higher. That's
Is that a
higher
good
than we
thing or a
wanted.
bad thing?
I mean, it's great that the ISA team is performing so well. It also is
Because I understand you're convinced. You made it sound like you were not so convinced about the good or the
No,
bad.
the ISAs are great. It's just, okay, the agents, obviously we need more accountability around the agents, talking to their leads, talking to their sphere, using the right scripts and dialogues to set appointments, right? Because we would like to see that number closer to, 40% ISA, 60% agent, right? Without any actual reduction in closings. So same amount of closings coming from the ISAs, but I want to see more production from the agents. But that goes right back to your first question that you were asking, the difference between old market and today's market, and the need to hold people accountable to help them grow.
Would you mind if this trend that you have right now goes overextended for another year or two? Or are you really trying to crank it where it gets to that percentage where you feel comfortable? 40-60%.
I mean, we're already going in that direction. So I think that for the contracts created during the month of June, I think we're going to be sitting more at about 45 to 50%. So the agents really, really are getting into the year. So we like where things are trending. We want the team to grow to around 550 transactions over the next 12 months. We did 391 transactions at 151 million of business in 2025. Just by comparison. And we're already trending up a bit. Of course, that January and February I was telling you about, kind of, we're kind of trending with 2025, but now with where we're going, now that the accountability and everything is really starting to show the benefits and we're starting to see the actions from that, I think we're going to trend in that direction.
One last question about ISA. So do you believe that is a good thing for a solo agent, high producer solo agent to bring an ISA? To help the agent produce more?
Two things. Okay. One, if they have a huge sphere, huge database, yes. Two, if they have a lot of leads, yes. Three, if they're a high volume caller, like even if they're just going after expired for sale owners, right? There's still value to it, right? Because some of the calls that need to be made are really discovery calls. I mean, the agent should, if you're doing expireds and for sale by owners, in my mind, it really should be the rainmaker agent that's going after those. If you're playing it as a single agent, but then you have a slew of follow-ups you have to do. And I do think, an ISA can be a huge benefit to that, a huge benefit to the sphere aspect, of their business. And then also the leads that they have.
Awesome. All right. Well, I just want to move a little bit into another direction here in the podcast. Sure. So I want to ask you about leverage, accountability, processes in order to accomplish creating ancillary businesses around you. And I know you're very big about that. You're very big about having different businesses around your brokerage and around your team. because they all fit each other in a way,
Right.
shape, or form, right?
Right.
So, what was the first business that you started, ancillary business that wasn't the team or the brokerage?
So one of the first businesses that we started is I partnered with one of my people to help them start a title company. So, we already had a great individual who could be an operator, so I partnered with her to help her get that going. And, it's but part of that was I also brought on a sales manager for the team, right? So when I brought on that sales manager for the team, that freed up probably about 40, 50, 60% of my time, right? So what can you do at that time? Well, if you have the proper leaders in place, the proper people that you can put in as operations or CEOs, then you have a huge opportunity underneath you, because if you have a high producing team and then you have an operator who's able to scale business with your help and ingenuity, and you have the time available, that's really where skill has come from. And that's really where skills come from, for all of the businesses. um, and kind of looking back at those businesses and where they're at now, they've all grown, so super super blessed with that. But we're now on a track for further growth. And I don't know what you're doing specifically in your businesses. I have some idea, of course. But leveraging AI, with those leaders, both from the standpoint of making sure you're painting the vision and making sure that you have clear steps, but then also when you're doing your one-on-ones or your company meetings or whatever it might be, you're feeding all that data into AI. So in other words, you have the bedrock of the goals of where you want to go. Then your meetings are producing the outcomes. So not just, you're probably familiar with the term rocks, so you're not just producing the rocks, but you're also capturing the nuances in each meeting. And then after those meetings, you're holding those partners accountable. And then part of that too is just the messaging too, because it's accountability is great, but the messaging also has to be messaging that inspires, that makes them want to grow. Because, you may want to have the company grow or make more money. Most people will say, yeah, I do as well, but that's just part of the equation. So leveraging AI, leveraging organizational technique, and of course, we were talking about books. I think we might have talked about this one before. Leveraging the entrepreneur organization system, EOS traction has been a huge thing as well.
Yeah. So you would say that that every person that has a large team should be able or must create some sort of ancillary businesses around at least a couple. If that makes sense.
Yeah, so there's a few aspects of that. The first thing is do they have time or do they not have time, right? If they don't have time, right, they really should look at the joint venture route. Joint venture marketing services agreement, which I wouldn't really call a marketing services agreement an ancillary business, but a joint venture certainly is. Because with a joint venture, you're already stepping into a business that's already operating, and essentially, of course, you're setting up a new entity that follows the systems and processes of the parent company. So
Right.
you're owner of those company, owner of that new company, but you're not really having to do a lot of the heavy legwork. Alternatively, if you have a lot of time, in other words, you can leverage your time with sales managers, you can leverage your time with assistants, you can leverage your time with ISAs, VAs, or whatever you want to do. But if you also have a lot of time on hand, and then you have someone who has the aptitude and the desire to grow, right? You call it the business idea. You have the stream of income, which might be, or the stream of sales, which should come from your team as a base foundation to grow that business. And then you have the operator, someone who really, really, really wants it, and they're incentivized. They have to be
How do you
properly.
find those people though? I mean, how do you find people that align with you in terms of values? How do you find those people that align with you in terms of growth? Because I guess to a certain degree they have to align with you in terms of
Yeah.
growth, right? But
So
more important,
that
the values.
yeah, it's an awesome question. It's an awesome question. So I've always been a proponent of having a large team. Even back when it was just the team. I didn't want to have a 5 or 6 person team, because as we discussed initially, if you don't have at least 7 or 8 agents, you can't hold them accountable anyway. So I wanted to have a large team. We did a lot of mass marketing, on the radio, on TV, things that tend to bring in a lot of leads. So you need to have a lot of agents. But anyway, when you grow a large team, you need a lot of people. And some of those people are going to be, in your office. Some of those people are going to be remote. And I've been able to leverage, both groups of people. But when you have those people, you're going to have some special ones, right? I mean, we'd all agree every organization has a few special people,
Yeah,
people that
I would agree.
really want more, people who are very, very driven, people who are very, very smart, right? So your ability to identify those people and then offer opportunities for them to grow is huge, because at the end of the day, you take those people who are really smart, really driven, et cetera, et cetera. If you don't offer the proper opportunities for growth, how long are you going to have those people?
Right.
A couple years, 3 years, maybe four. So if you're thinking about them and you're thinking about a growth trajectory as well, right? You're going to be able to leverage those people, and you're going to build trust with them. They're also going to know how you work. They're going to know that you're a go-getter, systems, and who doesn't want to go along with that? I mean, who doesn't want to have the opportunity to jump on board someone else's train and then grow something, inside of that ecosystem? It's like getting a jump start. I mean, we all know, starting a business from scratch is not necessarily the
I wouldn't
most.
start some of the businesses that I started if I knew how that was going to go. Probably.
You mean the blood, sweat, and tears, and the profit that you thought you were going to make, but you either A, it never materialized, or it took a long, long, long time.
Yeah.
Well, I mean, that's the beautiful part about, ancillary businesses is, at least when you start, right, you're going to turn a profit, because you can look at the numbers, you can look at what your capture ratios are going to be, and there's established values for that. So you kind of already know where it's going to go. But to me, because the business should be produced in such a way that it's class leading, it's best in class. I mean, most of my businesses, if you Google them, they have 5-star reviews, hundreds of reviews, right? They're really, really, really good businesses. So the agents aren't just like compelled to work with those companies because they're on the team. They're compelled to work with those companies because there's
They're
a
great.
lot of integrated accountability, and they're great businesses. But also, what does that mean? Those businesses can, of course, seek out business from other companies and other agents, because they're best in class. I mean, who doesn't want to work with the number one in whatever category that it is? So anyway, I mean, when you build a business, you should build a business not to just be, I hate to use the term, but not to just be a parasite on your own existing business and to parasitically just take revenue. I mean, you're supposed to benefit the client. You're supposed to benefit the agents. You're supposed to benefit the people that work at that company too. And when you do it that way, that's where you get growth. And it's kind of synergistic.
Have any of your JVs flop? I mean, I know one of your businesses that flop because of a JV, but
Yeah.
how's that
So,
how's that been for
so
you?
my first title company joint venture, which actually, I wouldn't say it flopped. I mean, we both made quite a bit of money during the entire time we were joint venture partners with each other. But they really started to grow. Of course, I will leave them unnamed because they're very nice people. But both, their business also started to grow outside of our business, and we went from being a very large fish, even though we were continuing to grow. They did a great job growing outside of us too. And it got down to the point where their service started to hit that kind of like median point, the average point, right? All the while, the people that I work with directly, they're trying to innovate and be best in class and be top at what they do. So eventually it just got to the point where the agents just decided they wanted to work with, our entity versus the other one. And I even stayed loyal to the company, even though we had our own company. I stayed loyal and said, hey, you know what, if you guys can earn the business, earn it. You guys have been here for a very, very long time. Continue to do it. But it just got to the point where, the service that they were delivering was average to good, and the other competitor was excellent. And, the agents just made their own decision. And then eventually, I got a phone call and said, hey, don't know if the joint venture is working very well anymore. And I said, right. And that was that. That was that. But that joint venture benefited both parties for a very, very long time.
Got it. Well, that's a cool story. All right, so team building, future of team building. About two episodes ago, I had someone that was running a large team, and he said that the future of teams is large teams, and that those large teams are going to absorb everyone else, and then you're just going to have a bucket of 5 or 6 teams in the entire market where you are, and
Yeah.
probably those teams are going to become even bigger by absorbing teams in other markets and whatnot. Do you agree with that conclusion?
I mean, it really depends on the MSA size, the mean statistical area, essentially the market that you work within. If you live in a 100,000 person town and, there's no other cities anywhere around you, so that's it, you're unto yourself. I would say that probably does not necessarily hold true. You probably have, because the team that's there probably can't get to the point that has critical mass. But in line with what you're talking about, I think part of where we're going is a lot of the systems that you can implement, right, to make the company run more efficient, to get more from the existing business that you already have, to run the proper marketing campaigns, to nurture the middle of your funnel, which I know a lot of people don't do, because it takes a lot of time, it takes a lot of energy, to create all those things, to have a properly running machine where you get more from the existing business you already have, more ROI, you have to get to a certain size. I would say that, unless you are doing probably in the neighborhood of probably 60 to 70 million of business, and if you have less than about 10 or 11 agents, some of the systems that we use are prohibitively expensive,
Right.
to implement, for instance, one of the AI call training, call recording, and it's a fantastic system that we use. And of course we try to be brand agnostic here. It's very expensive. It's like, but it was something where, we can just say, yeah, we can go ahead and spend another 23 or $2,400 a month because we know we're going to get a 10 or 15, 20% lift in such and such area. Right. So
Right.
that kind of incremental improvement, or, being able, as you know, we have tons and tons of VAs that we use, obviously, we work with you guys. And being able to leverage that brings our costs down. Being able to leverage the technology, some of the technology everyone can access. It's very cheap. Like for instance, AI, it's very inexpensive, but some of it is very expensive. But it does work. And you just wouldn't do it if you had a 5-person team. So those agents can't produce as much. There might be, call it 10,000 leads that come in. We can get more from those 10,000 leads than someone else. So that means we have a better ROI on those leads. We have a better margin. We can market more because of it, and we're just more efficient overall. And then the agents are seeing more successes. In my market, for instance, there are plenty of other teams that actually have more agents. And these are teamerages, so it's very, very easy to see how many people are in their team and what their production is. And what you see is this number, pretty big team, bigger than ours from an agent count standpoint, 25 to 30 agents. And, they're doing 45, 50, 60, 70 some million business on 25 to 30 agents, right? Well, if I'm an agent, would you rather be one of the 25 people sitting on top of $70 million of business, or would you rather be one of the 19 people sitting on top of $151 million of business?
Right.
Bigger cake, fewer people. I know which party I'd rather be at. So that makes it easier to recruit, makes it easier to retain, and then it's just easier to get bigger and bigger and bigger.
I have a conflicting vision in that regard, because I know that when your team is small, like maybe as you said it before, if you're in a smaller MSA,
Mm-hmm.
it's easier to be more visible because they can go to, they have a bigger network, they have more connections and whatnot. So I
Mm-hmm.
would say my answer would be, I guess it depends on the size of your market. If you're in a small
Completely agree.
market, you
Yeah,
can
I think there's
absolutely.
two things to it. You have the very, very small markets, but then you also have the very small markets within the very big markets, right? So for instance, if you're selling real estate in Palm Beach, or, one of the very, very affluent markets, right? You may only interact with just a couple percent of the entire group, right? But that couple percent knows you and knows your small bespoke team extremely well, right? And you're the dominant player in that area. No one else is going to get in. And at that type of level, and because every deal is so valuable, you
Right.
don't need to have all these analysis tools and this, that, and the other. But if you're playing the big game in a big market, it's, I think that initial,
Right. You
yeah,
need to have a certain
experience.
size.
Yep.
Yeah, I agree. All right, so I'll call this section rapid fire questions, Kris. And I'm going to ask you 3 questions, and you're just going to give me a quick answer on every one of those. All right, so one book every team leader should read.
Okay, so the one book I think every team leader should read, I know this sounds probably not what you're thinking of. It's called Managing.
Managing.
Right.
Carl Ginn.
Right.
I haven't
Because
read that one.
at the end of the day, you're managing. I mean, it's about the structure, that you, how you manage, how you incentivize, how you communicate, all those things are super, super important. I think the other part that goes with it, I know you said one book, but if you've got a larger organization, then this one comes into play. But I mean, both of those books kind of go hand in hand with each other.
I would add to that Blue Ocean. If you're reading traction, you got to read Blue Ocean.
Right. So you look outside of the businesses that are already saturated, right?
Yeah, I mean, overall, because your business is going to plateau at some point. I mean, believe it or not. And if you high producers, if you have people that have that passion inside of them, you got to find a way to keep pushing forward.
It different.
Right.
Yeah.
Make a difference. Plowing forward. All right. So one trait every great hire should have if you're running a team, right?
Coachability.
Okay, that's great. One sales activity agents don't do enough of.
So the one act sales agents, right? So making contacts, real contacts, where they're actually talking to someone, they're in a two-way conversation. I think that a lot of agents wait for business to come to them. There are very few that really, really, really prospect the way that they should. And the other one thing, social media, leveraging social media, to the maximum level. It's a force multiplier. It doesn't matter what you're doing, whether you're doing, the social farming contract, or you're going after expires and for sale by owners, or you're just working leads. It's going to accentuate every single thing that you do, and the percentage of agents that I see that really, really dig into it, it's just not high enough, so that's the other aspect.
Are you guys on TikTok or not? Not really.
Some of our agents use TikTok, and I think the agents that are bringing in a lot of military transfer business, TikTok is working well for them. Most of them are using Instagram and Facebook. But what I like is not from the generating outside business perspective. That's good, and I think if you play the magnet game correctly with those platforms, it can definitely work. But you got to think about your sphere, everyone you already know, your past clients, and even your leads. Say you have 200 leads that you're working on, and you've built strong rapport with 80 of them, right? But they're not going to buy for 6 months, or they're not going to sell for 9 months, right? Well, you can send them your drip email, and you can call them, and you can text them. But if you build a lot of rapport with them, it's not unusual for them to be on your social media, right? So then now they're seeing you talk, they're seeing where you're going, they're getting to know you. And that kind of creates that glue in between those contacts on long tail leads. A lot of people don't think about that. They're like, well, unless I've closed with them or I'm friends with them, I'm not going to add them. That's not the case. If you've built rapport, do it. If they're a lead that just came in your inbox, don't do it.
Yeah, I would agree with you, because I remember in the flipping company, I added a seller to my Facebook page, and she ended up referring 2 more people. 2 more people that she knew, and I bought their houses. But yeah, now that you mentioned
and that's so unconventional, right?
How it is, right? Because you're like, all right, I bought your house, you're gone, right? Like, I don't see you ever again. But they don't think about the referral aspect of it, and that, they know people, and those people know more people, and
it creates a self-fulfilling prophecy. So for even those people who have a really hard time, putting content out there, but at least they get a little bit out there, right? If your content is going to be going in front of potential leads, clients, and everything else, you're just more inclined to do more of it, right? So by adding more and more of those people, every time you put content out there, it has additional value beyond what you initially thought it would.
All right. So I have here the $1 million question. So if every real estate team leader in the world was watching you right now, what would you tell them that could have the biggest impact on their growth?
Leverage. Leverage. I mean, if one word would be leverage. But you have to remember, if you're gonna have leverage, you also have to have organization. You know what I mean? If you try to implement leverage without systems, what do you have?
Chaos, I would say. Right.
Right.
I've been there,
So,
done that. So I know exactly
mhm.
what you're talking about.
Yeah, and
Um,
I know you are an expert when it comes to SOP systems, this, that, and the other. You know, so you have to have both. You know, you have to have both. Otherwise, you don't have
yeah.
a machine that grows.
Right. David Thompson, which is, I don't know, you might know him. He's a coach. He was saying the other day that he was in the previous podcast. He was saying that there are three things that every team leader should have is recruiting ability, um, agent scalability, meaning make their agents grow. And the third one was processes and systems. Without that, if you only have two, things start to fall apart at some point, right? And it makes a lot of sense that you need to have that tripod, those three things all the time, all together.
And you should be willing to recruit for your own team. You know, I mean, you've known me for a long time, and you know, I used to use recruiters, and you know, I think I've had at least 5 of them, and they all do the
Did it
same
work
thing.
well?
They just try to get everyone, anyone who says yes, right, whether they fit your culture or not. You know, and then you know, if you got a great team with a you know a great name recognition in the market, no one's going to be better at recruiting and discovering who are the right people other than you. So you got to be willing
So
to
you
do it.
think that should have been delegated? The team leader should always be recruiting.
So I delegate some of the reach outs that occur by text, this, that, and the other. But when it comes to the phone calls, of course, I do those phone calls. So some of the initial, like getting to, you know, kind of crack that nut open and then open up a conversation, I might delegate that part. But when it comes down to rubber meeting the road and actually getting on the phone, I'm the one that gets on the phone. The other thing too is, I mean, you're just setting an example for your agents. You want your agents to make phone calls, right?
I guess. Yeah.
You got to show that you're willing to do it yourself. So,
Yeah, well,
and
it's got to be very difficult, you know, for a lot of leaders because they're managing the leads or doing this and that, and they have to recruit.
yeah.
And I've seen, you know, there's a lot of rotations sometimes in certain areas. It's just the way
Yeah,
the game is, I guess.
but you
Right?
know what, Sergio? There's always stuff in their daily schedule that can be delegated. You know, what I like to call it is $5, $10, $15 an hour work. There's plenty of work that everyone is doing. That falls into that.
VAs.
Yeah, exactly. VAs. And, you know, even if you can carve out 15 or 20% of your schedule and get that time back, I mean, you're swapping that time for highly productive activities. If you choose to do those activities, that's the key.
Right, right. I would agree. Well, I appreciate it, Kris. Thank you for coming into this episode. Your insights are always highly appreciated. Thank you for your time, brother.
Thanks for having me, Sergio.
Kris, thank you for joining us again and sharing your experience, leadership, insights, and practical strategies with our audience. And to everyone listening, if this episode gave you value, make sure to follow, like, share, and drop a comment. Until next time, build with purpose, lead with intention, and keep cracking the code.